Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. The three amigos are with you on Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. George Kerth joined by Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap. First off, Tyler, welcome back to the Newlywed. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Please excuse any clutter behind me. I am newly moved into this place, so it's kind of a process trying to get everything set up. I know I have lived here before, but it's still a process trying to get everything set up. I got boxes everywhere behind my camera, but being married, man, it is crazy. It's a weird feeling. It's basically the exact same feeling as being engaged and dating, except my ring finger is a little bit heavier. So yeah, it's a good day.
Cody, how about you?
I've been married for 6 months, so same
Not
shit,
what I
different
meant, but
day.
cool. Oh, man. Okay. Well, let's get into some football discussion. Make sure also, if you guys do not already, follow us on every social media channel at the Couch GMs, and you can join our Discord chat, and you can ask us any questions at any time. All right, guys, let's just jump in, relax, and chat. So if you've been living under a rock over this past weekend, you missed the fact that there was an NFL draft. But there's a couple other things we have to talk about around the draft. I'm going to start actually before the draft with our discussion here, leading off to a new top paid quarterback in NFL history being Lamar Jackson. So I'll say after all these contract negotiations and the fact that he was requesting a trade, they didn't just resign him off the bat. I am actually shocked to see this big of a contract come for Lamar Jackson, but well-deserved. And when you talk about the fact that there's going to be guys coming after him quickly, he's not going to be the top paid quarterback for long.
When we were talking contract extensions, I thought we were talking Jordan Love, baby. I thought that's where you're going with this. But going Lamar Jackson, I think it was a great signing. I'll talk first. I don't think everyone on this panel is going to agree. Lamar is a baller. Yes, some people will, question his throwing ability, but the dude can pass in the league. He's a dual threat quarterback. Hopefully he can stay healthy. That was a big reason why the guarantees was such a holdup. He got more guarantees than Jalen Hurts, which not fully guaranteed, but was big for him. And if you listened to the show a couple weeks ago, I compared it to he requested a trade, compared it to Deebo Samuel of last year, a guy that requested a trade and getting some more guarantees and stayed back. I think it's a great move for both Baltimore and Lamar because they have bought into him so much already.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know Lamar is a baller, and no matter what I've said about him, I do think he's actually a good quarterback. I think he does help the Ravens win. With that being said, I still don't think it was a good idea. I wouldn't have given him that long-term of a deal. He hasn't been able to prove that he can stay healthy lately, and his knees make me nervous. I mean, if his knees were starting to give him problems and he was a quarterback like a Joe Burrow, I'd be like, all right, he could probably still do pretty good though, because he is not relying on his legs very often. He is mostly relying on his arm. But he is a quarterback that relies on his legs. His danger is his legs. If he really starts to continue to have injuries with his legs and maybe it slows him down, maybe it makes him less explosive or anything along those lines, or even if he just can't stay on the field because of injuries, I think this contract is a bust and it's going to be hard to get out of. And I want to say my own bias might be the one saying that, but my whole family is Ravens fans. For anybody out there that didn't know, my whole family basically lives in Maryland, and they're all huge Ravens fans. And my brother, who is a diehard Ravens fan and would run through a brick wall for Lamar Jackson, texted me immediately and said, I hate that signing. That was a stupid signing. This dude can't stay healthy. We're going to regret that one. So even Ravens fans are kind of freaking out about this one.
The health thing is, I think, is what this entire contract is going to come down to. If he ends up staying healthy for the majority of the first 4 or even all 5 years of this contract, it's going to pay off in a big way. If he still struggles with injury problems like he did the last 2 years, it's immediately going to be a regret, and we're going to have to look at all these. How can they get out of this contract? How much of a dead cap is it going to be? Can they trade him? Blah, blah, blah. So how the discussion is going to go forward with this is going to depend a lot on the health. So I think that's where it is, and I think it's good that we're all in agreement that it's not the talent side of it. But when it comes to what you were saying about the long term is where you're at the problem. So the Ravens, when they offered him a short-term deal, it was only for about $40 million a year, even though it was fully guaranteed. do you think so? He got $52 million a year average when you break down his 5 years, 260. Would you have paid him as high as 55 over 3 years if it meant you had that 3-year buyout, or do you think that would have been too much for you?
I'm willing to take the higher money if it means a shorter deal. I don't really know what their cap situation's at. I haven't been following it that closely. I don't know if that handcuffs them enough to the point where they really can't build a strong roster around Lamar, but a shorter term deal I'm willing to do. 3 years, I feel like that gives you a good solid look where look, if he does make it the full 3 years, you're able to give him another contract or at least try to. If he can't make it the full 3 years, then at least you already have that buyout, but honestly, by the end of that 3 years, you're probably not going to want a quarterback of his talent set, of his skill set, being a primarily mobile quarterback. 3 more years in the league, you probably won't want him much longer than that anyway. So I think that's a perfect length. I just don't know if he would sign that deal.
I disagree. I like the deal. He's only 26. He's already won an MVP. Yeah, he's missed some games the last 2 seasons, but we talked about it last year when he actually got hurt. Like, could he have come back to play if he had a contract that guaranteed him some money? Would he have pushed through? Don't want to question his toughness, and I wasn't reading the medical reports, but there definitely felt something like that. There was some animosity between the head coach, but they worked it out. And even when this contract is over, he'll be 31. So he might even get another contract with the Ravens, depending on what he does in the future. And he has arm talent. We're not used to it, but there's nothing saying that he can't develop into more of a pocket passer too as his career progresses. That's not what he does right now. But it's not like he has zero arm talent and he's only a guy that can run. So interested to see on his progression as well.
Now that they have weapons around him that are the best he's had in his career. I
For
know
sure.
it's only Nelson Aguilar and Odell Beckham, but when you consider what he's had, it's honestly is better.
Zay Flowers too. Let's not forget him.
You're right, and I mean you still throw in who they had before, but yeah,
And Mark
no,
Andrews is
it's an
still there.
improvement. It is. I'm mostly talking wide receivers. He's had Mark Andrews the whole time, and that's obviously been his safety valve and the one reliable target he's had.
George, I think your team had some big news during draft week as well.
Yeah, they changed their name to the Philadelphia Bulldogs first off, but no, going out and getting another Bulldog in a trade, DeAndre Swift. I mean, I immediately put my fantasy football glasses on when I saw the trade for DeAndre Swift and said, "Oh, here comes another crowded backfield. DeAndre Swift's not going to see the touches that he's going to demand. Why'd the Eagles do this anyway? They already were fairly deep in the running back room." And then I look at the fact that, one, it doesn't really hurt DeAndre Swift because they already had just brought in David Montgomery in Detroit, and they had a whole bunch of other backs there as well. And when the Eagles have this split rotation running back, they were missing that big boom threat kind of a guy. When you consider Penny could be it, but we haven't really seen him in a small carry role be able to do that, as opposed to DeAndre Swift last year when he was with Detroit. He was turning 10 carries into a touchdown and one big run every single game. So that might be a good fit. Just, I mean, in my fantasy, putting my fantasy glasses on, I don't really like it.
Fantasy-wise, yeah, I'm not touching that backfield. DeAndre Swift is an electric player. I was very annoyed to hear that the Eagles pulled this trade off for basically scraps. They were able to get a super talented player in DeAndre Swift. I hate it. You already have the Eagles looking at like one of the best teams in the entire NFL, and you're like, well, let's give them a really talented running back for free too. Let's just make them even better. Like, does nobody else want to make the Super Bowl? Frustrating, but especially in the NFC. God, that whole conference is a joke, but I digress. Anyway, so yes, but I'm not touching that backfield for fantasy purposes because it's going to be like, wow, DeAndre Swift looks good. Wow, Boston Scott is looking shifty. Wow, Jalen Hurts is really running it with his legs like he's really taken off. Wow, Rashad Penny's really getting some good carries. Touchdown, Trey Sermon. Like, it's going to be – it's the Eagles. They're stupid with the running backs. You never know who's going to get it.
Did you even mention Kenny Gainwell too? I didn't hear if you said it.
I didn't.
So there's okay.
One of them's going to get cut, so
probably Sermon.
Probably Sermon, but yeah. I wouldn't touch that backfield, but it should be good for football purposes, not for fantasy purposes.
Do you want to hate the trade more? Just curious.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so they moved up. They moved back in the 7th round and traded away a 4th round pick. If they do not re-sign DeAndre Swift, they're projected to get a 4th round comp pick for him. So they traded nothing, literally nothing.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. People are just kind of. So I was talking to somebody recently that truly believes that the Eagles just kind of have some blackmail on every team in the NFL, and that's why everyone's just kind of like giving them stuff. Like, yeah, don't leak my information. I'll give you this player. It's kind of what it seems like because none of these trades make sense to me.
I mean, even their draft age, what they give up a 4th round pick to move up one spot in the 1st round.
Yeah, and it was known that Chicago liked Jalen Carter. So either they were out the last second and were like, we're going to get something out of this pick for what we didn't want anyway, or I don't really understand.
When we've obviously, I know it's 9 and 10, not 2 and 3, but we've been a lot bigger trade packages. Those top 10 picks are valuable, and to move up and jump somebody, I think the NFC North team was trying to get Jalen Carter, whether it was Detroit at 12 trying to move back up, hence why they took a running back, or Green Bay who took an edge rusher at 13 trying to get back up, and the Bears were like, all right, we're going to screw our NFC counterparts and just let the Eagles make the better team better. But
yeah, another team that's in their conference, that'd be interesting. I get not wanting to trade to your division, so like maybe it's just a luck thing there, but you had to think that Packers or Lions would have been offering way more than a 4th. Even though it was a couple extra spots, it's still...
And it wasn't like they took Darnell Wright, who wasn't like Skoronski, who the Titans got, was probably the best offensive lineman, at least in my opinion, left on the board after Paris Johnson went. And then I would have taken Broderick Jones, who went 14th, over Darnell Wright too. So Bears, questionable decision at the tops, but I do think they got the draft, unfortunately, as a Packers fan, pretty nicely.
All right, so who's your favorite pick of the draft?
Favorite pick of the draft. Because I'm Cody and I like to add caveats, are we talking just overall? Or are we talking specifically for fantasy football, since that's kind of our root?
Overall favorite pick.
Overall favorite pick, I'm going to make it 2 picks. I don't care. I love what the Houston Texans did. They said, we want 2 guys and we're going to make it happen. And to trade from 12 to 3 and get their quarterback and the top defensive end in this draft. Yes, they could be terrible, and that could be a top 5 pick next year, but they got their 2 guys. And I really like that's some Madden stuff. Like that's what I do in Madden. And so as a Couch GM, definitely my favorite pick or picks, if you want to describe it.
I thought they gave up a lot to get up there, but I guess when you consider how much people are paying to jump that many spots to get quarterbacks, wasn't really that bad.
I think, if I remember correctly, the 49ers traded 3 first-round picks to get from 12 to 3 to get Trey Lance. And they gave up 2, plus a second.
True. I mean, not a bad point there. I'm going to, I guess, lean towards value, and the fact that Seattle could sit put at 20 and get Jackson Smith and Jigba is big. I mean, they already have DK Metcalf there. Tyler Lockett is an aging wide receiver, so there you have another anchor to go across from DK Metcalf now as they start to like work their quarterback situation out into the future. So just going on value alone, I think that's my favorite pick.
Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's not going to be a fun name to try to spell or pronounce all year.
It's easy to spell.
JSN?
Or that. That's
how I'm going to say it.
So I will say that my favorite pick of the draft, purely off of value, is going to go with the same team, same position. It's going to be the Seahawks taking a wide receiver. But this time I'm going to go with A.T. Perry. I think A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest is a wide receiver with a lot of upside. I was really hoping the Titans would take him in round 4. And then they didn't. So then I was hoping they'd get him in round 5, and they didn't. Then I was hoping they'd get him around 6, and they didn't. And then the Seahawks landed him in round 6. I think it was just great value. Is he going to be a star right away? Absolutely not. But I do think within a couple of years, he could be a really solid piece for that Seahawks offense.
I mean, he was a guy that had felt too. He was on Mel Kiper's top 5 for a while. there's a couple of those guys. This is just a weird draft overall. But speaking of some other wide receivers, guys, I really like. You mentioned JSN at 20. He was my favorite guy in the draft. But we had 4 run back to back to back to back, and Jordan Addison, the wide receiver out of USC, going to Minnesota to essentially replace the Adam Thielen role. Like, he's probably now a top 3 pick in Dynasty for me this upcoming year. So he wasn't my favorite wide receiver in the draft, but because of the fit that where he went, I really like the Jordan. As a Packers fan, it kills me to say that, but I really like Jordan Addison ending up in Minnesota.
I like it too. It's actually interesting how he was. I mean, he went as 4th wide receiver on the board. He was probably as low as 7th or 8th on some people's boards even. And now in Dynasty, like you said, he's most people's wide receiver 2 behind JSN. The fit's absolutely perfect.
I think the wide receiver that I like even better than that, and might be my bias here, is Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt falling to the 3rd round. I mean, there was rumors of him potentially being selected at the very end of the 1st round. A team like the Chiefs could have really used his talent. But instead he falls to the 3rd round and goes to the Giants. I mean, the Giants have been recycling through wide receivers that they were hoping to break out. They're hoping to take off, and none of them have been. And now they select a guy in Jalen Hyatt where there's a video going viral of him talking to Cowboys coaches where the coaches are telling him that he's just a speed threat. He's not a route runner, and he just goes off and shows his route running ability. And the guy's got crazy good speed. And anytime you get speed like that, we've seen it before, whether you're the best receiver out there or not, that speed alone makes you so dangerous and really can spread a defense, open up holes for the offense. So I love the Jalen Hyatt pick. Hate to see him go to the Giants, but let's see. It's a weapon for Daniel Jones.
I don't know how easy this is going to be. I feel like we should at some point here have fun with predict which Giants wide receivers are going to make the roster and which 3 are going to start. Because I'll just name them off. We don't have to actually do this now, but Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Jalen Hyatt, Jamison Crowder. And then they have a bunch of other guys like David Sills, who was a actual asset for them last year. A bunch of other guys we don't really know, but I was 7 or 8 deep just right there.
Wan'Dale's for sure going to make the roster. He was their 2nd round pick last year, got hurt. He's 100%. He's locked.
Hyatt's
I feel like
locked.
Sterling
He's
Shepard and Darius Slayton.
Yeah, Hyatt's a lock too as well.
So we got Wan'Dale, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt.
I could see somebody like Sterling Shepard getting traded. If they feel like they're deep at wide receiver,
okay.
I mean, there's a lot of wide receiver needy teams. They could actually get somebody to overpay for Sterling Shepard.
Someone who's been amazing, but just can't stay healthy. Like, he's had ridiculous stretches of 3-4 games in a row, and then he's out for the rest of the year, or he's out for 4 weeks. Like, very sad career he's had, but he's got so much potential.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And another wide receiver I'll mention, because those are my favorite things in fantasy. I believe it was the 3rd round. I don't have the draft order up in front of me, but Rashee Rice out of SMU going to Kansas City. He will fill right in for the Juju Smith-Schuster role. And he could probably do a little bit more on the outside with some development. So they got a great pick in the 3rd round. And then their defensive lineman, Felix Adike Uzama, I believe is how you pronounce it, that they got right at the end. Everyone is talking about how the Eagles won the draft because they got Nolan Smith to pick 30. The dude's under 240 pounds, and there's been 8 players to have 10-plus sacks under 240 pounds in the history of the NFL, and 3 of them are Hassan Reddick. So I understand the excitement there, but that's not a typical weight and size for an outside linebacker. But the guy taken right after him, I think, can be a day one impact on Kansas City. So once again, Veach up there, the GM for KC, doing good work for a team that's consistently drafting at the end of round 1 and most rounds.
I think we talked a little bit of the good. I want to go to bad and tell me why and what the Detroit Lions were doing in round 1.
Yeah. I mean, Jamar Gibbs, like, I don't get Jamar Gibbs because, one, then they gave away DeAndre Swift for nothing.
Yep.
And then they had a running back that they wouldn't pay that broke their all-time rushing record, held by Barry Sanders. That got broken. But then they brought in David Montgomery, and they were still like, you know what? Let's go with a running back. And to turn around an off-ball linebacker in a, like, debatably the best linebacker in the class was Trenton Simpson out of Clemson. He didn't even go to the 3rd round to Baltimore. So to take an off-ball linebacker, yes, he's out of Iowa. He'll probably be a decent player, but it's not a premium position. Like, and then even you can talk about the 2nd round. Like, they went Sam Laporta over Michael Mayer. Like, I understand, like, Laporta has a little bit more upside with the athleticism, but Michael Mayer was like a consensus 1st round pick, like all around dude, blue blood program out of Notre Dame, for that. And then plus they got Brian Branch, that was probably the that everyone's going to talk about in the 2nd round as well. But he's an undersized safety that most like I'm not a huge fan of. I think there's a reason why he fell.
For people out there who don't quite understand why certain values hit in the draft, I just want to kind of give my half knowing what I'm talking about opinion on it. So like Cody mentioned, off-ball linebackers, like your middle linebackers and stuff, aren't a premium position because even though we see them as flashy guys who get a lot of tackles, they aren't necessarily someone who is put on an island on a defense or somebody who is in a position that could make or break a play every single play. Like example, a cornerback, even a safety. Even safeties aren't as valuable as cornerbacks. And on the offensive side, like a wide receiver, a quarterback, etc. Running backs are almost considered the same exact way because there's a lot of people in the NFL as this new wave is turning saying that if you put any running back behind a good offensive line, they're going to be able to get yards, they're going to be able to get touchdowns. So for a team that is just starting to claw its way out of a very long, rough time, that they still have a couple holes they need to fill, to go out there and draft 2 positions in the top 20 that are kind of what you consider luxury positions in the 1st round is just super disappointing.
I agree. And I'm glad I'm not the only one because they're an NFC North rival and I didn't want to talk too bad about them.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know much about Jahmyr Gibbs. So I'm not going to pretend like I do. But just looking at like his overall stats, looking at some highlights, like I don't understand the hype either. And to me, the more laughable thing isn't drafting a, overhyped running back. It's the fact that you celebrated the way they did. Like they lost it.
Mm-hmm.
They lost it like they just drafted Barry Sanders again in his rookie prime. Like they went nuts. So, I mean, looking at it, like Jahmyr Gibbs, his college stats are they're okay. I mean, he has 5 to 6 yards per carry, which sounds good, but he's never had 1,000-yard rushing season. He's never broken double-digit touchdowns in a season in his 3 years of college football. And, DeAndre Swift had two 1,000-yard rushing seasons in college. If you want to look at that, Jamal Williams had 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons in college. If you want to say, okay, well, maybe it's just Alabama running backs don't run as much. Derrick Henry had a 2,000-yard season for Alabama. Mark Ingram had a 1,000-yard rushing season for Alabama. So it's not the school. It's not the running backs. Like we've seen people with more success in college, people that were playing well in the NFL, and instead you go for this reach on a running back that I just don't understand the hype.
Yeah, and they, like Cody even said, they brought in David Montgomery, who has had 1,000-yard season in his career. He's never had less than 801, which was last year, and he was hurt for a couple of games. Like, it wasn't a position of need where you had to go reach for a guy who was going to, at the earliest, go pick 30, most likely falling into round 2, maybe even round 3, to take him at pick 12. Like, you should only be taking generational talent type players at the running back position at that point, like the Falcons did with Bijan Robinson, which I also think was a little bit of a reach, but to each their own. At least he was like the considered generational talent running back. So just going with another one that early is ridiculous.
So I do think Bijan Robinson kind of messed up the view on running backs because there was a lot of people that didn't actually think there was a big gap between him and Gibbs. Gibbs was just more a little bit in a rotation. Gibbs is being comped to Alvin Kamara. They thought he might fit a little bit. He fits really well into his game. The Jets reportedly wanted him at 15 if whoever Detroit didn't take him, which would have sucked the Brees Hall owners out there in dynasty football. So thank God that didn't happen. But so like I get like he's a prospect, like, and he definitely, like, he was a first round lock just a week
Yeah.
out from the draft. Like he had moved up into that round, but all the way at 12, like I thought he was a perfect candidate for like Cincinnati or Dallas, like one of those teams in the late 20s. Like that's where I thought he was going to go. Um, so Detroit definitely had some questionable moves, but you did ask what was the worst. And before actually even my real answer, since you just brought up Detroit, since we're all from Penn State, or Pennsylvania, how did Sean Clifford get drafted?
Welcome, Green Bay Packers fan. Welcome in, Sean Clifford. I don't know. I hate to say this about a guy, but I texted Kempy, who you've seen on the show, who went to Penn State for the beginning years of Sean Clifford, and he said something along the lines of he's wasted Penn State's time for the last decade and a half. I don't expect him to get drafted. And then he went round 5. Was it 5 or was it 4?
It was 5.
It was 5. Okay. But still, the fact that he went at all is shocking to me, yes.
I think Zerline had him as his 414th prospect.
And there was what, like 260-ish
picks? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler, I know you're not a big college football guy, but
I like college football. I'm not a Penn State fan. I don't watch Penn State very often. But the little bit I do watch, yeah, I'm not really sure how Sean Clifford got drafted either. He wouldn't be the first disappointing Penn State quarterback, though.
Oh, at least he went in the Hackenberg, I'm thinking of just off the top of my head right away.
Good old Hackenberg.
Yep. At least he went in the 5th and not in the 2nd. And for all Packers fans out there who freaked out about it, and I was one of them, just remember we developed Tim Boyle into a solid backup option who is still playing. He's going on his 7th year in the league, and he played 19 games in college, 3 years at UConn, and finished his career with a 1 touchdown to 13 interception ratio. So maybe they see something in the guy. So college stats aren't everything in terms of how well you do the league.
It's true.
But actual worst picks, we can actually do that.
Well, let me hold on before we go into that. Little frustration that I saw in this draft. So I feel like NFL GMs are trying to buy too hard into recency bias. So I want to backtrack a little bit. You said Jahmyr Gibbs is like an Alvin Kamara comp. And I think that's actually a really good comp because of the fact that Kamara really didn't do all that much in college. He just showed flashes. He got drafted higher than we expected, and he ended up turning out to be a phenomenal running back. He has provided amazing years for the Saints. However, it's just because it happened once doesn't mean that happens all the time. And I saw a lot of that with the draft with late quarterbacks. And you heard, if you watched NFL draft coverage, they wouldn't shut up about it. It's the Brock Purdy effect. It's the Brock Purdy effect. Yes, Brock Purdy was taken in the end of the draft, and he ended up really shocking people and really surprising and flashing. And now people are like, wow, we can get that value of a quarterback at the end of the draft. And the amount of quarterbacks that we saw drafted, and quarterbacks that normally would not be drafted or would just be an undrafted free agent, like, it's insane. I feel like GMs went way too hard on the Brock Purdy effect, and I think it's garbage. Will one of them break out to potentially be a good backup quarterback in the NFL? Probably, but I wouldn't go much higher than that. We're not going to see the Brock Purdy thing happen every year.
Yeah, exactly. Are we good to jump into worst picks here? Because I actually might throw a hot take out here.
All right, go for it.
You can always throw a hot take.
Someone mentioned recency bias, and I'm going to mention somebody here that I think is all recency bias. Number 4 pick to the Colts, Anthony Richardson. We all predicted his path from the beginning of the draft process. Everyone viewed him as a super raw quarterback who may work out, may not. He's going to get to the combine. He's going to put up these ridiculous numbers. Someone's going to fall absolutely in love with him because he's this athletic freak, and they're going to take him too high. And now I'm also worried the Colts are going to start him way too quickly. And I'm just worried he's got bust written all over him.
I love the pick for the Colts, in all honesty.
The fit when it comes to scheme and coaching makes sense. But I feel like they're way too hyped for a guy that's going to need time.
Yeah, but he's also the guy, too, that, like, he can learn on the job. Like, he can take the Justin Fields approach. It wasn't pretty last year, but he improved. He still has a long way to go, in my opinion, definitely as a passer. But he has the athleticism that will get him by, that he can do it on the job. And honestly, like, as the Colts organization, what good is it to start Gardner Minshew for 4 weeks, 5 weeks to play him? Like, that offense has got to be different for Anthony Richardson. Just put him out there, let him run the ball 15 times, and go at it. Have some fun. At least it's not a 39-year-old vet for the Colts.
Well, that's finally the first good thing they've done when it comes to that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
You're a Titans fan, so you don't want to talk about the Colts. I understand.
No, I am frustrated to see the Colts get Anthony Richardson because I do think he's an athletic freak. And, after having to sit and watch them with Peyton Manning for so many years and Andrew Luck for so many years, it's been nice to finally see them with bad quarterback play. So I am really afraid that Anthony Richardson does become something. Just like I'm really afraid that CJ Stroud becomes something, because playing in a division with CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Trevor Lawrence, all very young, and all have the potential to break out and be amazing quarterbacks, it's not a good look for me. However, I do think that Richardson is kind of a raw talent. Like, I do think he needs some development. And the thing that I fear is that he doesn't have a strong veteran to sit behind for a year. And I do think that starting Gardner Minshew, like Cody said, I don't think it's a good pick. I don't think it's a good idea. Like, you, at this point, with the roster that they have, you might as well start Anthony Richardson. But the problem with me is, what if he does struggle as bad as we're thinking? What if he really does go out there and suck? Like, what if he needs some development? He's not ready for the NFL level and he struggles severely. Like, what if that gets in his head? What's that going to do for his career? We've seen quarterbacks in the past really struggle in their early years and then they end up breaking out. I mean, look at Geno Smith right now. The dude has thrown so many interceptions, you can't even believe it. But yet this year earned himself a big contract and really impressed. We've also seen guys like Josh Rosen go out, have one bad year, and it's like, yep, your career's over, and that's it. So I'm not comparing him to Josh Rosen. I'm not comparing him to Geno Smith. I'm just using those as examples. We don't know what that's going to do for his career. We don't know what kind of person he is confidence-wise, or if the Colts organization or fan base is going to keep buying into him. You have 1 or 2 bad years for that organization after spending a 4th overall pick on you, they're going to get real feisty real quick, and they're going to start calling for a backup or somebody else to come in. So my fear for him is that he doesn't do good enough in his first couple years.
So I'm glad somebody else sees that. It seems like the spotlight and the expectations on him are super high. And I get, Cody, that you think he can, learn on the job. And I think there is there might be something behind that, seeing how Justin Fields has done it. I am also, with Tyler, worried about the patience they're going to have, because I feel like they're not handling it that way.
So let me ask you this. Who's in a worse situation when they started? Anthony Richardson or Trevor Lawrence? With Urban Meyer, that offense, he led the league in interceptions that year, or Anthony Richardson.
But I don't think they're comparable, because, like, I think Trevor Lawrence was in the worst situation. I think that the Jaguars were definitely in a bad situation. However, I feel like the expectation of the Jaguars was so low that they're like, even with Trevor Lawrence, we still expect them to struggle, that he kind of got that grace period. He kind of had the ability to struggle a little bit and be like, nah, it's cool. The Jags are really rough. Where I don't feel like the Colts are in the same position. Even though they had a bad year, I still feel like people have been saying for years now, the Colts are a quarterback away. The Colts are a quarterback away. And they do have a pretty strong roster around them. They have a better head coach. They have, just a better team history. People expect the Jags to suck because they're the Jags. People expect the Colts to be a winning football team because they're the Colts. And I feel like the Colts are all around set up better, so the pressure is higher. So he might have a better chance of success because he has a better roster around him, but I feel like the pressure and that window is going to be smaller for him because he has a better roster. Just my opinion.
What Tyler said.
I don't see the pressure. Like, that's my biggest gap. I don't see what pressure he's under.
You don't see what pressure he's under, Go listen to the Colts front office talking about this guy and how it seems like it's the coming of their savior.
They said
and
they would
don't
take him
think
number
they're
one.
patient.
They bought him. That was their guy. They would take him number one.
But I don't think they're going to be patient enough. Like, Trevor Lawrence was also supposed to be the generational talent next Andrew Luck quarterback. And then he went to a situation where not only they knew the team needs to be improved around him, but their head coach kicked their kicker in the leg, and they knew that they were going to be set back a year. Gave Trevor Lawrence that extra time that even though he probably already had. The Colts, besides this past year, have been a roster that can compete for, at least some kind of leverage in the AFC. And they've been that quarterback away. I'm with Tyler. I don't think they're going to be patient enough with him, and he needs 2 years, 3 years to get to that point. And I don't know if this roster is set for that 2 years, 3 years, because maybe by the time he gets to that point where he has an offensive system in his mind enough that he can run an NFL system, that aging roster is it's going to be turned over. They're not going to have the dominant defense that they have now. You can't tell me that this roster's loaded with a bunch of young guys who can, all of a sudden turn it around in 2 years. Like, example, how the Lions are right now. They're an older roster that has more set up to win now. Not saying that they're ready to compete now if they had an Aaron Rodgers, for example, but they're more in that situation.
Yeah, and I would say the pressure also comes at the look of the division. I feel like when Trevor Lawrence took over, the Titans were looking like a really strong team, and the Colts at the time were looking like a really strong team. So again, you don't expect the Jags to do anything, but you cannot sit there and tell me that no one thinks the Colts have a chance to win this division now.
It's just the Jags now, and
there's expectations of it. Like, the Titans are really falling off. The Texans, they had some great picks, but I don't think they're there yet. And the Jags, yes, they are looking better, but even after looking better last year, they barely scraped into the playoffs. So I'm not calling them a juggernaut by any means. They are still definitely a beatable team. So I feel like there's some expectation that the Colts could win this division. So the pressure is on, because, if they're already looking at that team like, yeah, this could be a division winner, not just a playoff team, but a division winner. And then he goes and, they have a 6-11 record. The pressure is going to be on right away.
Yeah, I still don't see the pressure. I think they can compete for the division, like you mentioned. I think that's 100% the case. And I think, back to the Trevor Lawrence point, we saw how important coaching was for him. He looked like he was going to be the bust of all time with Urban Meyer. He got Doug Peterson in there. Doug Peterson believed in him, put him in better situations. And Anthony Richardson, outside of maybe going to be in Philadelphia, if they didn't re-sign Jalen Hurts, is in the best situation he could have got drafted into, in my opinion. And I think because this is the...
But isn't that pressure, though? If he's going into the best situation for him.
But who's putting the pressure on him?
The fan base, the media, the team. Like, if he goes into the best situation for him and fails, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying he will fail. I'm not saying that. I think Anthony Richardson has a chance to be a really talented quarterback in this league, and he could really light it up next year. But I'm saying, if he fails, if he goes in that good of a situation, that good of a team, with that big of a chance of winning not only football games, but the whole division, and he puts up like 5-12 record, 6-11 record, and he, has 15 touchdowns and 22 picks, like, I don't see how there's not pressure.
I mean, this is still the same organization that drafted Peyton Manning number 1 overall, and he led the league in interceptions. Was there too much pressure on him to quit? Like, this was their guy. They're going to buy in. And let's not forget, we started this conversation because George said this was the worst pick of the draft.
Yeah.
And it could be. We don't know. That's the beautiful thing about the NFL draft. I mean, how many times have we seen players get drafted and we're like, this dude's going to be a stud, and he's out of the league in 2 years? How many times have we seen guys get drafted and we're like, what a stupid pick? And then next thing you know, we're like, that was a genius pick. It happens all the time. The time. I still remember the Titans drafting Derrick Henry and myself being like, why the hell did we go get Derrick Henry? And then there was a bunch of NFL media that was like, that was a weird pick by Tennessee, a little high for Derrick Henry, and now he is the greatest Titan to ever wear the jersey. So And that's just from my organization alone. So there's always those draft picks. So it could be the worst pick. This is all opinion based. We don't know until they're in the NFL. Cody, what's your worst pick?
That was a steaming take. I'm proud.
Yeah, it was a bad one. But I think it's a good point to remind everyone that, yes, we're grading, we're picking the best picks, but drafts need 3 years to fully understand where these prospects are. Look at Jalen Hurts now after year 3 compared to where he was after year 1. Look at Josh Allen where he was after year 3 compared to year 1. Heck, sometimes 4 years. Look at Daniel Jones. He got 45.
Not sold.
He got $45 million a year. Got his team to a playoff victory. Like, you have to give him credit for that.
Dude, I love how many Eagles fans last year were saying, yeah, we have a good roster, but I still don't think we're good enough to make the Super Bowl because, Jalen Hurts really isn't that good. And, like, every Eagles fan I spoke to was like, yeah, Jalen Hurts is kind of a question mark. I'm a little worried about him, but otherwise the team's good. And now people are like, Jalen Hurts is God. It's crazy how much one season can flip the expectations.
He went out there and proved it.
In 1 year,
but did he? How much pressure is he under right now? I mean, he didn't play from behind at all, and he just got paid a boatload of money. Like, are we talking about them drafting a quarterback next year? Like, what if he comes back to earth and goes 5-10? How much pressure is he under?
It's true.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not hard to be good with that good of a roster around you. I mean, Geno Smith just had one amazing year. Are you sold that Geno Smith should have like a 6-year deal now, and then he should definitely be the starter for the Seahawks for long term? That dude just proved it on a much worse roster, where Jalen Hurts did it 1 year on the best roster in the
I did
NFL,
hear somebody say after the Seahawks draft, to kind of get us off this tangent, how they are the biggest competitor to the Eagles this upcoming year. I'm like, man, we're really buying into this Geno Smith. Like,
stop.
Right? No.
But
no, honestly, the worst thing is they probably are a top 6 team in the NFC because the NFC is hard.
I was going to say, but who's the biggest competitor to the Eagles in the NFC?
Dallas.
Yeah, so outside their division, is it Detroit or Seattle? Or a team from the South?
I want to say San Francisco, but I understand their quarterback situation is very fluid.
Definitely interesting. But my worst pick of the draft, that's a tough one. Because there was... So I'm going to go with the 49ers. And I don't care how good Jake Moody was. You don't take a kicker in the 3rd round. You just don't. And then the only other thing to compare to that is the Patriots taking a kicker and a punter. Like, geez Louise.
Yeah, what is that? What is happening?
Has anyone ever taken a kicker and a punter, at least in like the modern era?
Not that I can think of.
I don't think it's ever been done.
Yeah, I think they were the first one.
Okay.
Heck, and the Packers, they drafted a kicker in like the 5th or 6th round, something like that. He's Daniel Carlson's brother. He played last year with a torn he tore his ACL on his non-plant leg trying to recover an onside kick for 16 from 50 plus. So yeah, why are we even drafting kickers?
I mean, look,
bro, what?
If you're going to say that, I could take the easy way out and say the Patriots kicker is my worst pick of the draft then, because the dude not only was drafted in the 4th round, but they traded up in the 4th round to get a kicker. And he's accurate, but does not have a powerful leg at all. So, is Ryan Suckup worth trading up for the 4th round to take?
He was Mr. Relevant at one point. So just fun fact.
How about that?
There's
only been one kicker that I can think of that has been drafted, with a lot of buzz and actually worked out, and that's Sebastian Janikowski. Was taken in, was it the 1st round with him? And then he ended up playing like 17 seasons for the Raiders. Yeah, pick 17, played 17 seasons. That's the only kicker I can think of in my head that was drafted and worked out very well.
All right, George, let's go completely generic. Let's go with this year's draft. If you knew for a fact that rookie Justin Tucker, and he would become Justin Tucker, was available in this year's draft, how high could you justify taking him?
12.
I feel like I'd struggle to say above round.
No, I'm saying pick 12.
Oh, pick 12.
Yeah, if the Lions could take Jamar Gibbs, someone could take Justin Tucker.
Well, in that logic, I'm with Cody. But I was going to say is I feel like I'd struggle to say above round 3.
Dude, I would take him in the first. If I was guaranteed to get Justin Tucker accuracy and can hit routinely from 60 plus, like you get across midfield and you're almost guaranteed 3 points. He is such a valuable weapon. For 10,
I feel like
15
this is
years.
a really interesting question, so I might have to throw this one out as a poll onto the social media forums just to see what everybody else would do for Justin Tucker, because I am curious. But my worst pick of the draft, I don't think it's necessarily a bad pick, but I'm picking it because of value. And I'm going with the Los Angeles Chargers, taking wide receiver Quentin Johnston in the first round. And I mainly just say it because I feel like at their pick, there was better receivers on the board. I think Johnston is a second-round pick, not a first. So value-wise, I don't think it's the best pick. Plus, Johnston really struggled with catching the football in college. Do you really want Nelson Aguilar in the first round? I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. So that is my worst pick of the draft.
Interesting. Well, I know that's a good amount of draft talk. So before we wrap up, though, and we're going to be talking rookie dynasties next week and stuff like that, but is there any guys that stick out to you right now, or you want a little bit of a tease for the upcoming episodes? And while you think about it, I will give mine. And for all our fantasy owners and playing Dynasty, most frustrating, we'll call it the most frustrating pick as a fantasy owner, was Chardonnay, the running back out of UCLA, to the Seattle Seahawks to eat those Kenneth Walker snaps. Because a guy that we drafted last year, like, oh, he's going to be a bell cow top guy. I think he got drafted in our way too early mock draft not too long ago. And here we are again, another running back by committee. And I wouldn't be surprised if Chardonnay becomes the top guy midway through the season, and then all of the Kenneth Walker #1 overall picks just go down the drain.
And they just got rid of Penny. We had our hopes up on that one. I'm with you. That's a bit frustrating. I'm going to give a little shout out to Buffalo for jumping Dallas to get Dalton Kincaid. And I really hope he turns into the tight end that we can rely on in the next generation of tight ends. Not super confident on it. Obviously, tight ends take a few years to like actually develop. So don't draft him this year and then lose faith after 1 year. I actually saw a Twitter post this week that said it was like trying to show how long it took our favorite tight ends to hit their pop year. And a great example is Travis Kelce didn't pop until year 4. George Kittle popped in year 2. Like it's not
We're still waiting on Kyle Pitts.
We're still waiting on Kyle Pitts. I mean, technically he had a top 10 finish in year 1. So it's kind of like a little different as opposed to like, Travis Kelce didn't have a top 10 finish until year 4.
It's like saying a fantasy baseball catcher is ranked top 10. It's not impressive.
Yes. But I'm going out there as he's someone I'm keeping an eye on closely and might have a little bit to talk about next week in our Dynasty mock.
All right, my tease then, don't overthink it. #1 overall pick, Bijan Robinson, but I would say, is your first round pick valuable enough to take this year with Dynasty, or is the talent next year a little bit more juicy, and is it worth trying to trade to get picks for next year instead of the top of this year? Is it worth it? But we can talk about that next week. Real quick, give a quick rundown, not a huge explanation, for, let's say, fantasy Dynasty purposes. Real quick. Top 5 quarterbacks. How would you rank them? If you were in a Dynasty draft, quarterback only, top 5.
For fantasy football.
For fantasy football. Dynasty football, yep.
I'm going last.
All right. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Levis, Hooker.
So the exact order of the draft.
The exact order of the draft, but not, I don't think, how some people have it in fantasy, actually ranked in fantasy.
In fantasy, let's see. I will go Dynasty. Man, I asked the question, but I wasn't ready to answer it.
I'll go if you want.
Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, Hendon Hooker, Will Levis.
Oh, okay.
All right. I'll put Anthony Richardson 1.
No, you would.
Especially for fantasy. That rushing ability is legit. Then I would probably go CJ Stroud 2, just because I like him better. Bryce Young 3, because he's in a better system. Oh, man.
This dude's about to drop a Stetson Bennett on us. Just watch.
I'm not going to drop a Stetson Bennett on us. Not going to do that. It's between Hooker and Levis, and I'll go Hooker because he has a better team around him currently, and I'll go Levis 5th.
Okay.
And Levis puts mayonnaise in his coffee, so like he's already off my dynasty draft board.
He apparently only did it one time as a joke, but yeah, it's definitely not something you like to see.
And his dad's a little weird, according to Twitter. So
I'm not surprised. Look, I'm not thrilled about the pick, so you don't have to talk me down.
No, but real quick, you brought up Bijan Robinson. I'm definitely interested to hear about that because the Falcons were like a top 5 rushing team last year. So just like the pick value of like all you Tyler Algier like apologists
Truthers.
out there, probably truthers. Thank you for the word I couldn't think of, but like what an interesting pick on a team that I think they have some other needs, but I think that's a tease.
Quite a few, yeah.
It's weird how teams have other needs, but they draft things they don't need instead. It's crazy.
Lions.
Titans. It's crazy.
Hey, best player available or best player to maximally improve your team is the best way to go, in my opinion. But that was the draft. That was my favorite time of the year. Well, favorite off-season event, I will say, for sure, around the NFL. Love the draft. Looking forward to next year. Packers had 13 picks. It is an incredibly busy weekend. Definitely still recovering from that one. But I think that'll wrap it up for us at the Couch GMs podcast. George looks like he wants to say something, so before I close it out, I'll let him go.
You're missing the most important segment of the show, Tyler's oddball fact of the day.
Oh, you're right. Oh, he's been married, and he was like gone for 2 weeks, and we are doing this every other week now. I'm so sorry, buddy. The floor is yours.
It's all good. It's all good. And today's fact I decided to share because we're talking NFL draft and because of the interesting players that were drafted, aka kickers. I have a kicker draft fact for you today. Kicker Ovi Johansson out of Abilene Christian, a Sweden college, is the oldest player to ever be selected in the NFL draft, taken by the Houston Oilers in 1977 at 29 years old. Played 2 games, went 2 for 6 in his kicks, and that's it. That's his whole career. Oldest player ever drafted.
Do we have a round and pick on him?
I don't. I could try to look it up real quick.
No, that's fine. I
actually
curious.
knew that one. I knew it was 29. Oh. I don't know why. That's the dumb stuff that I can remember in my brain. The oldest kicker drafted was 29 years old, but that's how my brain works.
Someone older than Ryan Tannehill in half of this year's draft class. That's crazy.
And Stetson Bennett is right up there.
No, I know. That's why I said half of this year's draft class, because it's very interesting seeing red shirt seniors who had an extra year due to COVID coming out of the into the draft at age 25, 26. Like it's interesting.
OBJ Johansson was drafted in the 12th round, pick 316.
Okay, so that was very significant back when they had like 15 rounds in the draft.
But did you hear the last part? 316. There was 59 or 69 picks this past year. So like we're only talking like 50 picks more, and we only did 7. So this goes to show on how many
fewer teams.
Yeah, for sure. All right, did I miss? You got any other facts, or are we good to?
That is my fact for today.
All righty. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the fact out there. Let us know in the comments of this video if you're listening on YouTube, and if you are, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well. In the reviews on the podcast platforms, wherever you listen, let us know who your favorite pick was. Thanks again for checking out the Couch GMs podcast. Reminder, during the off season, we are only every other week, so we will be back in 2 weeks, do our first Dynasty mock draft. I'm Cody Roadcap for Tyler Snyder and George Kerth. We will see you all in 2 weeks.
Boom.
Nice.
Choo choo.